Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Welcome to episode number 768. Well, today we are going to defend the cow. We are going to defend protein production through livestock, and we are going to talk about all of this with Diana Rodgers, the owner of Sustainable Dish, the author of a new book, and the creator of a new movie coming out, The Sacred Cow. Really interesting what she has to say in terms of the attacks on protein production through livestock in the United States and in other countries as well, but in particular the attacks on beef and what she is doing to fight back. We owe her a debt of gratitude in terms of her taking on this fight for all of us who want to raise livestock, and we're going to listen to that right now. Diana, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, I'm excited to speak with you. You came highly recommended by a guest I had on just a few weeks ago named John McLaughlin from Michigan, and he was telling me all about you and what you're doing. So, interesting stuff.
Yeah, happy to. It's a crazy time, as I was mentioning right before we got on the phone, because I have a lot of balls in the air right now with all these different projects. But I'm more than happy to share what's happening.
Well, that is the I don't know if it's the blessing or if it's the curse of the entrepreneur, but having a lot of balls in the air just seems to be the way of life that we choose when we go out on our own.
Definitely.
All right. Well, let's just start like this. If you could just kind of introduce yourself to my audience, tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure. So I'm talking to you right now from the farm where I live, right outside of Boston. So we're in a small suburb of Boston, and we run a organic vegetable CSA, and we also do pasture-raised animals. We do chickens for eggs. We do sheep and goats and pastured pork. But the majority of the farm is vegetables, and it's really a community farm. So we're right smack in the middle of the town. It's not a farming community, and so it's kind of unique. But I have been to many other parts of the country filming for this project I'm working on. So basically, I'm married to a farmer, and I have worked on farms. I actually am the one who got him interested in farming because he didn't grow up farming.
Okay.
I sort of poked him into it. We met in college, and but I'm now a registered dietitian, and I went back to school kind of after I had the kids and was kind of figuring out maybe a different career path. So I have a background in marketing, and then I switched and became a registered dietitian. And I've always been interested in food. When I was 26, I found out that I have celiac disease, and that was just a huge shift for me and really solved a lot of the problems. I think I was undiagnosed my whole life and was just very sick as a kid. So for your listeners that don't know what that is, I feel like everyone does these days, but it's I'm allergic to gluten, so I can't eat beer, pasta, pizza, nothing, no bread at all, and pretty much everything in the middle of the grocery store I'm allergic to.
Oh boy, okay.
Yeah, which is kind of also a blessing because then you're sort of forced to stick to, meat and vegetables, which I think is the healthiest way to eat anyway. So, so I became a dietitian, and was sort of carving out my own life, sort of separate from the farm, because I always had been the one that did the farmers markets and ran our farm stand and everything, and so I started talking about nutrition, but everyone was so interested in learning about my life on the farm. And so I started pulling that in a little bit. And what I realized was that people who are advocating for sustainability really seem, in the nutrition space, really are bent against livestock. And the way we farm, we realize that livestock are absolutely critical to the fertility of our vegetable farm. That's the whole reason we started raising livestock. And so I believe that you can't have a regenerative food system, a healthy food system, without animals. And I also think that they're critical to human nutrition. Humans are omnivores, and there's nutrients in animals you just can't get from plants. And so I tend to go to a lot of farming conferences and talk about nutrition, and then I go to a lot of nutrition conferences and talk about farming. And then that leads me into the next phase of this. So I have 2 cookbooks already out, and one's called the Homegrown Paleo Cookbook, which is like gluten-free cooking plus a homesteading guide, and then I have another one, Paleo Lunches and Breakfasts on the Go. But I was really interested in writing a book that was sort of the unequivocal defense for red meat.
Okay.
It just seems that cattle are, not only red meat is going to give you cancer and heart disease, causes diabetes, but also, cow farts are killing the planet, and it's wrong to eat beautiful animals, right? Like all this trifecta of nutrition, environment, and ethics attacking meat. And I just really feel that it's so misguided and such a, our country is already just so divided and polarized between rural and urban, and this is just yet another example of urban people not understanding what's actually happening on farmland. Like how does nature work? How does farming work? And so I started writing a book called Sacred Cow, The Case for Better Meat, where I defend red meat nutritionally, environmentally, and ethically.
Okay.
And then a film called What the Health came out, which is a vegan propaganda film, pretty poorly done, but super convincing to people. Everyone just, everyone around me was going vegan from this supposedly documentary. And so I just realized that, I have a podcast, I'm writing a book, but I'm really just sort of talking to people that are already in agreement with me. And really the best way to reach young people who are questioning, their diets and wondering about, cow farts and all these things would really be film. And so I started a crowdfunder and raised a ton of money and started filming. So right now I am in the middle of finishing all the edits for the book and in the middle of finishing the film. So
wow.
It's a lot. I've had to put my dietitian practice a little bit on hold. I have another dietitian that's taking all of my clients right now. And this has been pretty much my full-time job for the last 3 years, is producing this film and writing this book. So the book comes out July 14th, and we're actually releasing it at Polyface Farm. Joel is having a huge event with Mother Earth News in July. And so I'll be one of the keynote speakers there, and that's the week the book comes out. We thought of no better place to do it.
Yeah, very cool.
Joel is featured in my film and is a good friend. And then the film will also be coming out sometime in the summer, early fall. It just sort of depends on the distributor we use and their plans for it, but we're wrapping it up, and so it's a really crazy time, but it's also really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. Did you intend for the book and the movie to be coming out simultaneously, or is this something that just kind of happened to you?
No, and in fact, I'm actually missing a bunch of opportunities because I wanted the book and film to come out at the same time. So I'm actually not going to make any of the film festivals, and I'll probably be missing a lot of potential opportunities with the film, but I felt pretty strongly that they needed to come out at the same time, just because, I'll be able to get a lot of interest in the book. My co-author is a New York Times bestselling author, and so we're pretty confident that the book will do very well. But we also feel that the book is really going to be the anchor to the film. The book is a science text. It's a well-referenced and really hard science. The film is more storytelling and not anecdotal, but just less information-driven and more story-driven. And so we really felt that the two are complement each other, and you really, if you want to learn more, you need to have the book there. So yeah, wanted them to come out together. Very
cool. So this is such an interesting world we live in these days. You mentioned the trifecta, talking about cattle. It's about beef cattle. So as you have been putting together the book and the movie, have you been receiving criticisms or outrage from people who are vegan or things like that already?
What do you think?
I think you have, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten it as bad as I thought I would, but definitely on Instagram, people are just super triggered by even me saying that meat is a healthy thing to eat.
Wow.
Let alone that cattle can be, good for the environment, sequester carbon, increase biodiversity, all the great things cattle can do. So it's really, people are rude on social media.
Yeah.
I do get emails directed at me too. The tricky thing is I have a farm and I have a location. So most authors just have a P.O. box.
Yeah.
And they're not findable. So
have people come and found you? Have they come to your farm?
Some people, not protesters yet, but some people have showed up at my door that follow me on social media, like expecting to talk with me. And that's definitely unsettling. I live on the farm where our business is,
right.
And I have kids. So, luckily they're teenagers and they know not to just hop in someone's car or something, but it's definitely, cause for concern sometimes.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I'm the same way. But once you get people ramped up and angry, I guess, with the book or with the movie, then that becomes a real concern. And yours would not be the first farm where protesters have come and done crazy things, not violent things to the people there, but I know of a farm down in California where protesters showed up and they started taking calves and running off and stealing calves, and just crazy stuff that goes on.
Yeah, and I talk about some of those stories in my book, and I actually, I don't know if it'll totally make the cut, but there is a story similar to that I feature in the film.
Okay. Now, it's interesting as you talk about this, and I think about, I think about 20 years ago, like when I was going to college and studying ag and doing all of that. And there was a group of people that were very pro agriculture, very pro, whatever type of ag they were into. And then it seemed like the rest of the world just kind of wanted to go to the grocery store and get their food, and almost any wind could blow them. But now I want to ask you, with the popularity of these diets that have come out, which I saw and read about on your website as well, paleo and all these different diets that are so focused on protein and red meat and everything else, what has that done in terms of bringing people from the mainstream onto the side of livestock producers in agriculture?
Well, I think that the people, I mean, there's definitely, I see a growing demand to buy direct from their producers, like for sure, definitely. I mean, it used to just be commodity stuff, and now people can definitely make a living that way, especially if they live in a community like we live in, where we have direct access to people, and folks can walk here, basically, from our community.
Okay.
But people can even mail order for beef. So it's a huge market right now. And unfortunately, some companies aren't as transparent as others when they do internet sales. So I always encourage people to go directly to the farm, walk around. If something doesn't look right, ask questions and trust your gut. So yeah, I see a lot of CrossFit gyms host meat share pickups and will connect you with farmers, which is amazing. So I think there's a huge interest in people sort of like have this little badge of honor that they know their farmer, especially I think important when it comes to meat.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's interesting to see some big-time celebrities talking about meat consumption and all the benefits of it and things like that. I just feel like as people who raise livestock, and we do here in Idaho as well, I feel like it's fortuitous that so many people that have such large platforms have kind of come around and said, no, we want to eat meat, and here's why. To me, that's it seems like in agriculture we don't always get a lot of breaks. This seems like a break.
Yeah, I don't know that many celebrities that are pro meat. Who are you thinking of?
Well, I'm thinking of Joe Rogan. That's one that jumps out to me with
Oh,
this podcast.
yeah.
And then there's a few others that talk about their diets. You see these celebrities lose weight and get in great shape, and they talk about the meat consumption and things they did. But I wouldn't say they're the majority, but they do have large platforms, and so it's always refreshing to see that, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah, Joe Rogan has been a good ambassador for meat eating for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when did you begin this business? Like, when did you purchase this farm?
So actually, we have been entrepreneurs ever since we met in college, and we had a business where we would hire out college kids to do odd jobs, and we had insurance on the kids, and we would it would be like hire a kid, like paint your house, landscaping, moving, like whatever you needed a kid to do. We had lots of strong kids.
Okay.
And my husband loved running the crews and managing the kids, and I loved the marketing part and talking to the customers, and that's just our teamwork worked out in that way, and it sort of carried over. So the first farm that we lived at was owned by the Patton family, like General George Patton from World War II.
No kidding. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so we were there for 10 years. The farm had lost a ton of money, and Mrs. Patton hired my husband basically to save it. He was going to be like the last farmer that they were going to have before they just kind of gave up because the farm had been losing tons of money. And that was an organic vegetable CSA. When we came there, it was just a farm, a sort of conventional farm stand that was losing tons of money. So we turned it into an organic CSA and also incorporated livestock with that. And that was also near Boston, but north of Boston.
Okay.
In a town called Hamilton. And then as it sort of looked like the farm might not stay a farm forever and ever, we started looking around and just trying to find other opportunities where there was housing included. We don't have the capital to own a farm in the Boston area.
Yeah.
I mean, the land here is just so overpriced. So for a while, my husband was really like, I want to own something. And I was really encouraging him to think differently about that because the farmers who we knew who actually owned the land that they were on were just struggling financially really hard in this area.
Okay.
Just because, again, like there's just no way I could sell enough cabbages to own the property that we're on right now.
Right.
And so it would mean that we'd have to move way far away from family and all of that if we really wanted to own something. And so we looked at other alternatives and actually connected with an organization called Land for Good, and they help landowners connect with farmers. And there's all kinds of different arrangements, depending on what the landowner wants and, the experience of the farm couple.
Okay.
And so they basically put out an RFP for what would you do if you were the farm manager here at Clark Farm where we are. And so there were about 40 farmers that applied, and they just liked my husband's proposal the best. So we moved here 8 years ago. So this is so it would be 18 years total living on farms for us. And when we came here, this was a old dairy farm that was just not in use at all. And we totally transformed the whole place. And now it's really the heart of the town that we live in. It's a community space. We have tons of work for shares that are just, local, lots of moms. They drop their kids off and then they come here and they work with the crew. We host international students through the MESA program. So we're lucky enough to have an apartment here as attached to our farmhouse, so we can host people, because that's another huge problem for us is labor, because we live in a really affluent area where housing is just astronomical. There's no way that anyone who's doing any sort of
Right.
blue collar job and can own a home anywhere near where we are. And so that's been a real struggle. So the MESA program is great, and we've connected with some really great students that come over here. They learn sustainable farming, and then they go back to their countries and implement what they've learned in their home areas.
Very cool.
So that's been really great. And then we work a lot with MIT and Harvard. We teach the school K through 8 here, and so really that's everything that has to do with the farm stuff. And then my job really is very separate from the farm at this point, which is kind of nice, that I've been able to sort of carve out my own unique enterprise. So basically I have an office, and I counsel people on nutrition, and then I just do a ton of speaking and writing about farming, and just trying to get people to learn more about why this type of agriculture is critical, and why eating it is the healthiest way to go.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've got a good college buddy who lives in Waltham, and so he talks to me about the prices of houses and real estate and stuff like that. So, yeah, to be able to farm where you're at, I cannot imagine what a 20-acre or 50-acre place costs that close into that metropolitan area, but it has got to be way into the 7 digits, I would think.
Yes, definitely, and even with conservation restrictions on it, it is.
Wow.
So it's a huge problem.
Man, it's such a different model of farming. It's why I love doing the show, to be able to speak with people and get different perspectives. So out here where I'm at in the Intermountain West, we lease ground to kind of expand the amount of farm ground that we can run. My wife and I do, but it's always somebody who lives on the ground and they've got some pasture or they've got some fields that they don't want to farm, and so they lease it out. But in your case, the whole farm, including the farmhouse and everything, you're living right there on the place that you've got this arrangement with.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a nice situation for us, where the owners of the farm are the employers, and so we didn't have to put up all the capital required to convert this from a rundown dairy farm into a vibrant vegetable CSA and everything. So it's a really unique opportunity for us, and there are opportunities like that out there, especially in New England. There's a lot of people that own older farms that are looking for farmers to take them, to make, do a succession.
Yeah, there really is. And when you say succession, are you talking about a succession in ownership, or to have somebody come in and farm the place because they either don't have the time or they don't have the ability any longer to cultivate and take care of the place?
We have run into all kinds of really creative solutions that people have come up with.
Okay.
And Land for Good, again, is the broker that we went through that that helps landowners figure out what's right based on what they want. Do they want to set up a nonprofit? Do they want to just turn it over? Do they want, what do they want, and what works best for the land and keeps the farm operating? That's everyone's goal, is to keep the land in agriculture and to provide jobs for people that want to make a living farming. So there are opportunities out there, and I think that a lot of people, that's the biggest barrier to entry for a lot of farmers, especially in New England, is that they just don't have access to capital and land. And so if they get some experience working on a farm, there are great opportunities that you can find where some of the risk is mitigated for you.
Yeah, very good. Well, that's, I love the fact that there are people who own this land. They love it being a farm. They want it to stay a farm. And so they'll look at this direction rather than just selling the land and allowing it to be developed. And of course, if there's an easement, then they probably don't have that option. But in the cases where there's not, if somebody is saying, no, I value this being farmland enough that I'm going to find somebody to farm this, is not going to become a subdivision or something like that. I think that's great.
Yeah. So we need a lot more of this. And again, there's a farm in Waltham that's like this. Eastern Massachusetts has a really great craft program. Craft is an acronym for collaborative regional agriculture, something, I don't know, farming training or something like that.
Okay.
And so there's a network of young farmers, and every other week, farmers will go and learn a different skill at another farm. So they might learn flame weeding at one farm, and then they might come here and learn chicken processing, and then they, 2 weeks later, they might learn something else. And so there's a really great community here of all the young people. So I kind of know a lot of the farmers around here, or at least I did when I was younger. We host them less and less these days because we're so busy, but when we were younger, we were very, very active in it.
What an interesting way to do it. So I want to ask you about everything you've done in terms of outreach and educating people about agriculture and farming. So you've got your blog, your podcast, your books, your cookbooks, the book that's coming out, the film. When did this begin for you? When did you start putting information out there and interacting with people around the nation and around the globe about agriculture?
Well, I feel like my biggest strength is the ability to convert complex things into simple, images or simple words that lay people can understand. Actually, my college degree is in art education.
Okay.
And so I thought I was going to be an artist. And so one thing that I've done that I think I always wanted when I was working at farmers markets was an easy piece of material to hand out to people that would explain the benefits of meat. And I've just sort of honed in on meat because everyone's, again, just so plants are amazing and all meat is bad. And, it's not, I think plants are great too. I just see that there was a need that nobody was sticking up for meat except for industry groups. And there needed to be somebody who understood human nutrition and sustainability issues that could really do that for folks, especially for producers. And so actually right now, I'm getting some brochures printed. I have these great graphics that I've come up with that are all over my Instagram feed, which is @sustainabledish. And I'm stringing those together so that it is something that farmers can hand out at a farmer's market that explains the nutritional environmental case for why livestock managed well is actually beneficial to the environment and to our health. So I've noticed that in schools they're showing films like Cowspiracy in science class, which to me is just awful. So for folks that are listening that don't know Cowspiracy, it's another vegan propaganda film. Basically, cattle are the worst thing ever, and there's, whatever. So my goal is to at least have a counterpoint to that in schools. Like if they show that film, they have to show my film too.
Have you made any headway with schools in terms of, let's show both sides here?
I hope to. There are distribution companies that focus on the education market, and I need the film to be done in order to be able to connect with them. Okay. So I have gone to schools, and I've personally done presentations. A lot of students have reached out to me asking me to come. Like my school just showed Cowspiracy, and do you have any talking points for me? And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just come. I'll just come and talk because there's a lot to unpack. It's really easy to say meat causes cancer, and for me to unravel that one, it takes at least 20 minutes to explain why the evidence is so weak and the difference between correlation and causation, and to get people to think critically about something instead of just believing their emotional reaction to things. So cows cause climate change, again, they're worse than cars, right? Not really, actually. And let me explain why. Let me explain why biogenic emissions are very different than fossil fuel emissions. And, let me talk about the cattle carbon cycle and try to wrap your head around this. And so it's definitely something that I can't just continue doing for free, going to schools on
Right.
my own
Right.
dime. And so yeah, I'm hoping that the film and book and all the other material and the blog posts and everything that I'm doing will be helpful to concerned consumers and to producers as a place where to just send people like, all right, you're concerned, because farmers are, not always the best at doing absolutely everything, right? Sometimes they're sales, sometimes they're not the best at communicating, especially if someone's kind of agitated.
Right. Right.
And so I feel like they need support.
Yeah, well, I agree with you completely, and I want to get to the film and to the crowdfunding effort here in just a minute, but one more question about your farm before we get there. You mentioned right at the top of the show that having livestock was crucial for the type of vegetable farm that you want to have and the vegetables you want to produce. Can you expand on that and tell us how you integrate the two and why there's this symbiotic relationship?
Sure. I mean, anyone who grows vegetables knows that you end up, if you grow zucchini, you end up with some pretty massive zucchini. There's no way, even if you're a home gardener, that you have not ended up with a couple of baseball bat zucchinis, right?
Right.
And so we could either compost them, or I could feed that to a chicken, right? And if I fed it to a chicken, that chicken is going to turn those nutrients into eggs, and it's also going to fertilize a lot faster than that zucchini would break down in a compost pile. In nature, there are just no ecosystems that don't have animals as part of that system. The fertility we get from animals, they can move nutrients up hills, which is really critical. They can break down nutrients really quickly and convert them into fertilizer and meat. And so we do use a lot of compost, but we also use a ton of animal poop. We plant cover crops over our vegetable fields in the winter and then graze the animals on them. And so we're able to, keep the soil intact with planting rye or whatever the cover crop is, daikon. And then we can then have the animals, the sheep or goats, grazing on that land, mixing in all those nutrients and also making meat in the process. So I think that there are some smaller scale gardens that I've seen that don't use animal inputs, but I think that animals can only enhance a system if they're managed properly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the movie and the crowdfunding effort. So, to start off, what is your goal and how far along are you when it comes to the crowdfunding effort?
So the Indiegogo campaign ran for December and January, although it's still up because we exceeded the initial goal that I put up there.
Okay.
So the initial goal I put up was 60,000. It's always tricky because if you ask for, things are expensive. Films are really, really expensive.
Yeah.
Like to have a song by an original composer is over $20,000.
Wow.
Right. Animation is $12,000 a minute.
Oh my goodness.
So if I were to put my actual costs for what I needed to make this film on a crowdfunder, people would just freak out and feel like their donation wouldn't make a difference.
Sure.
And it's a tricky balance. I felt like I needed to ask for what was a reasonable amount in people's minds to give me, and I've also been fortunate to have a few corporate sponsors too, although most of the money has come from individuals. And so we do still need money for all the tours that I've been requested to do just to get out to schools and conferences. I've already been invited to about 15 different countries to screen this.
Wow.
I think that there's a worldwide need for this, especially in the UK and in Europe. But I'm also trying to figure out how to get down to New Zealand. There's some big need down there as well. And so, international flights are expensive,
Yeah.
and I've been doing all of this with no income for the last 4 years. So, and married to a farmer.
Yeah. Right.
So, so we do still need more, and we're offering a pre-order for the book and some Sacred Cow shirts as thank yous to folks
Okay.
who go to the Indiegogo campaign page. Basically the plant-based movement they've got millions and millions of dollars for marketing. There's a lot of money to be made, a lot of profit to be made in ultra-processed vegan foods like, Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger.
Right.
And there's, unfortunately, I've seen a little bit in the farming community. If you talk about grass-fed, then, conventional producers don't like that. Or, if I talk about how typical beef, is actually the water footprint is actually amazing. It's 94% of the water footprint, even in feedlot finished beef, is green water, is just rain. But people are making it out to be, that it's drinking water. And so I'm actually on the side of all beef, which again is a highly nuanced topic, but I think representing all livestock producers and really kind of unifying against this plant-based movement, which has huge ramifications for our school lunch programs, for SNAP funding, for the dietary guidelines are moving more and more plant-based, and there's just not a lot of pushback there. There's actually a group trying to redefine protein quality with the Secretary of Agriculture. So they're trying to put beef at the bottom of the list. Beef right now is at the top of the list, but this group has an ideological bias against meat, and they want soy and rice to be considered better protein sources than beef. And if this goes through, that would nobody cares. Nobody's pushing back, and meanwhile everyone's infighting in the farming community instead of banding together and helping to push back against this.
Yeah, there's too much of that. I try and preach all the time. People have their different niches and their different ways that they produce their agricultural goods and sell them, and you should talk about all the great things that you're doing and the great things about your products, but let's not run down other sectors of agriculture. At least, that to me should not be the way we market, because you're right about that infighting. We've got our differences in the way we do things, but we all stand together united when it comes to the ability to continue this lifestyle. So if I were to ask you, you've done so much research on this and you know about this, and the factual basis is not there for what people are saying about protein and cattle and things like that. So if the factual basis is not there, then what is driving this? What is the motivation of folks who, I guess, essentially don't want us to be raising cattle as a form of protein?
I think there's a couple main reasons. One is just urban elite people thinking that rural people don't deserve to have a lifestyle that they've been living, and that they're somehow better. So there's that. I think there's a fear of death in America, and less than half of Americans have a will. No one wants to talk about the fact that they might die, and they don't want to think about their food dying. And so if we can eat food that never died, then somehow we'll be cleaner and healthier and live longer as well, right? So in the book in particular, I really get into this bias against meat and how meat has become a scapegoat for our insecurities about the environment and about our health, and unfairly so. So actually the book was almost called Scapegoat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you make a very interesting point there, but when you describe the people who maybe they feel superior to folks who live rurally, or the folks who are they're so afraid of death they don't want to do anything or be involved with anything that's associated with death, to me, those sound like reasons why people might buy off on the movement. But what about the people who are engrossed like full time, their whole life, their mission is this movement, is the elimination of beef as a protein source? Are they doing it because of the reasons you just stated, or is there another reason there altogether for the folks that are kind of?
It's coming in from different angles. So first you have people like Walter Willett from Harvard and other people who really believe in epidemiology as the gold standard for nutrition research. And so these nutrition research is really hard to do. The best scenario would be you take a large group of people who are eating a certain way, and you lock them up in a metabolic ward, and then you take a mirror group and feed them the same exact diet, but only switch out the meat and follow them over time, right? We can't really do that. It's expensive. And so what they do is they look at these large population studies where people are self-reporting their dietary intake, which never works. Everyone lies.
Right.
Was it the burger last week, or what? Did you also have a large fries, 72-ounce soda, and a deep fried apple pie with that, right? But they'll remember the burger. They also tend to forget that they smoke and drink. They exaggerate their exercising. So there's all kinds of flaws with self-reported data. And secondly, just because something's associated with something doesn't mean that caused it, right? So eating ice cream is associated with warmer temperatures, but that doesn't mean that warm temperatures cause ice cream.
Correct.
Right? But that's what they're doing with these large population studies. So correlation doesn't prove causation. Just because someone is unhealthy, it doesn't necessarily mean the meat made them unhealthy. It could be so many other things. And when they've adjusted for all those other things, those confounding factors, they've found absolutely no difference in longevity between people who eat meat and people who are vegetarians. And so, however, people who believe in these association studies have published papers, have a whole academic career based on this, and so they can't change their mind. That would invalidate their entire career.
Sure.
And most professors are not that humble. And so that's a problem from the nutrition research side. But then we also have people that just have an extreme disconnection from nature and think that all food should be manufactured in labs. And conveniently, Impossible Foods owns tons and tons of patents. So they would be able to patent their whole process, profit off the whole process, and they have a built-in group of guerrilla marketers for them that believe that eating a plant-based diet is healthier, less harm, no beautiful animals died, and better for the environment. And so it's just coming from a bunch of different angles, and I think it's largely egos and profits that are driving it.
And is the movement against beef specifically, or do they have problems with chicken and pork and lamb and goat and everything else as well?
Most of them have problems with all of the other foods as well, but cattle seem to be the main target because they also cause methane. Right. Okay. So a lot of groups will claim eggs give you diabetes, or chicken is bad or whatever. But chicken is a little less bad, I think, because it's white and it's less on a bone, so it reminds people less of death. Sure. And it's not bloody looking like a red steak is. Chickens also don't look as much like dogs, right? Cattle cattle look like pets. Right?
They can.
And you would never eat your pet, and that's one of the arguments that they'll use. And so chicken and fish seem less dog pet-like or less human-like. And so therefore a lot of people will give chicken and fish a pass or eggs a pass. But yet so cattle seem to be, because the environmental claims against them, the most vilified.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's do this before we sign off. How can people, if they want to know more, they want to get involved, they want your books, they want to contribute to the crowdfunding campaign, where should people go to get involved with this, Diana?
Great, yeah. So my website for the film is sacredcow.info. And there, folks can see a little clip. We did a little sort of teaser about the film. They can see me talking about it. And then there's also a link there where folks can contribute, where they can either contribute through our 501c3, which is, so it's nonprofit and it can be a tax write-off, or they can go through our crowdfunder where they can order T-shirts and books and things like that. And on sacredcow.info, if they click on Learn, they can see all our blog posts. I've got some really great writers, including Lauren Stein, who's my main writer, and we're picking the podcast back up again. She's going to be co-hosting it just because I don't have the time to be doing so many podcasts anymore. But she is a food law professor in Arkansas and also raises goats and has a really great perspective on everything. And then on Instagram, I'm at Sustainable Dish. My nutrition website is Sustainable Dish, and so that's where folks can find us. We'll be at Polyface at the Mother Earth News Fair in July, and so tickets are on sale for that. And I'll be at lots of other conferences. I'm just booking them all now. I've been trying not to open my email too often. I think I gave you a hard time that I wasn't really doing podcasts right now just because I'm working from like 4 a.m. until 11 o'clock at night every day, just trying to get all this stuff done. But anyway, so I just really appreciate your support and could really use more support from food producers because this is who I'm making it for.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time, and man, best of luck to you with the launch and the release, and I really hope that you get into all those different countries and all those different schools and are the voice for all of us who are raising beef and other meat.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, everybody. Special thanks to Diana Rodgers for coming on and taking the time in the midst of her very, very busy schedule to do that. And I hope you got something great out of that. Hope you'll check out the rest of her resources. And as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.